All right, we all have goals, we all have dreams, but most people will never reach them. It's not simply about talent, it's about who you surround yourself with, whether you're willing to take risks, and whether you're prepared for those key moments that can change everything. Today I'm bringing on a coach I madly respect and many people madly respect, and he's become an icon in Washington State. Someone who just led his team to their first state championship after more than 5 decades since the school's last football title. Not only that, he's helped dozens of athletes go on to play college ball, and so I couldn't think of anybody better to teach you exactly what it really takes to achieve your goals and dreams. So, Coach Keith Ross, thanks for jumping on the podcast.
Sure, Nick. Thanks for having me. Like I said earlier, it's my first podcast. I guess I had to win a state championship before I got on one. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And I mean, you've got a lot of wisdom, and for the athletes listening, like anyone listening, you're going to learn from this. But what I really want to do is, really pull out the experience of like, what can athletes learn from this? So athletes, like this is for you guys. This isn't just for other coaches. This is for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's important that it's the athletes that won the state championship. It's just how we, get them ready, but it's the athletes that do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I think is important to highlight is, as a leader, like you're very much other people focused. So like that right there is a lesson in itself of like how you approach that. But I want to ask about the mindset shift of it, because it does look like, you've had a lot of great teams. When I was at Sumner, you had a couple playoff teams. That was back when it was like Linden was the obstacle.
Yeah.
But, what do you feel like has shifted now that you finally got that title, like mindset wise?
Yeah, there's a lot of reflection going on after you win the title that you've been chasing. And people, that's the one question I get. Why this team? And at first, Nick, I didn't know why. I knew we were talented. I knew we had a shot, but there was other teams that, I thought could win it. We've been to the semis, a couple times. And, I think it comes down to our staff is a veteran staff who knows football, but really concentrated on getting these kids prepared, both physically and mentally, and then building their confidence. We're really believers in, teenage boys' mental stability is fragile. And I think that I've changed even recently to where I used to have a lot of ego in coaching, and my ego would show up in bad ways when players didn't play as well as I wanted them to. I would actually get mad at them for not doing it, because I think a lot of us coaches, we come from successful backgrounds, and then we have a lot of ego. I think coaches need ego, but we also need to check our ego. And I think I've checked my ego the last couple of years, and I still coach hard, but I let kids make mistakes and I write it off as they're building confidence. And so during practice, our number one goal is to create reps to build confidence. So on Friday night, they can just go play. So, I would think that my biggest change is letting my ego go. And then the way we went about it this year was more business, giving the kids a chance to learn over the course of the year. You can't win the state championship in week 1. You got to win it in week 14. So we did a lot of, a lot of things that you helped us with, nutrition wise, weight room wise, resting more days than we've ever rested, things that I've never done. And, I think when you win one, you got to put a lot of things together. A lot of things have to fall into place. And we learned a lot this year, and hopefully we can carry it on into next season.
Yeah. I want to ask you specifically about the rest piece, like, because it seemed like that you said you've rested more than you have in the past. And I actually have a Sumner baseball player. I won't name names, but he kind of is in a forced rest. And I think it's because he wasn't resting enough. Why is rest so important?
Well, we beat these kids up on a daily basis. And for years, we just keep beating them up. And then they're like, my legs are sore, this is sore. And we're like, get tougher, And finally, the coaches needed to get smarter. So we made a deal with our kids. When it's time to go, we're going to go. But there was days where, like, I've never taken a day off, just nothing. And no meetings, because the coaches wanted to have meetings. But I said, if we're going to give them a rest, they need to go home and rest. So we usually gave an extra day of rest this week, which we've never done. We also started lifting on game day. And yeah, our strength and conditioning coach has a great, it's kind of a hurdle hip mobility, kind of warm up lift. And the kids were, after week 1, they're like, we're going to lift on game day. And then by week 3 or 4, they're like, hey, what's our lift today? So we did a lot of things different, you helped us a lot with nutrition. Sometimes kids can actually go backwards during the season. They lose so much weight and they lose so much muscle density and they're tired. So we used a lot of different ways to make sure that our athletes were at peak performance. And to be a good athlete, to be a championship athlete, you got to be at peak performance. And a lot of times it's the coaches, I think, that neglect that. And I think now we were wise enough to understand that we needed our kids ready to go on game day, and a couple rest days versus reps was more beneficial to us. So we had our kids. One thing that I'm super proud about, Nick, is in the state championship game, 21 of the 22 starters started the state championship that started week 1.
Dang.
We only had one kid break his leg, and we didn't have any concussions. We didn't have any shoulders. We were very lucky, but I think it's also how we treated them, because you can't be a peak athlete if you're not in peak performance on the field.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And I love that you emphasize that, because it's, like you said, it's something that coaches often neglect. And then what happens is the athletes start learning from that example. And then they start like, oh, I got to do the thing, because that expectation has been set. So,
yeah. More is not always better when you're playing a physical sport. So one thing we did, now we didn't, on the days that we kind of rested, we didn't take practice off, but we would spend at least half of the day at practice doing mental reps and walkthroughs. And we were allowed to do that because our kids were in such good shape coming into the season from our off-season program, which, we're just lucky that we get to platoon and have, we almost have a double practice. Like if you're a safety for us, you practice 40 minutes on D, then you get some water and rest, and then you go do your mental reps with the defense, a scheduled practice. It was scheduled sessions. It wasn't just, but we did a lot of more mental reps than we've ever done also.
Dude, that's good. I like that. I want to ask too about when, you talk about coaching styles. And I think that one thing that we find more and more is some people say that athletes, teenagers, etc., are becoming more fragile. And I know that you have more of an intense training style. You're more of an intense person. What's your advice to the athlete, like where they can use that intensity, not as an attack on themselves, but as a lesson?
Absolutely, Nick. When I was in college, I would get yelled at so bad by a coach. And I remember a senior saying, hey, listen to what he's saying, not how he's saying it. Okay. And so I coach hard, and our kids know that they're going to be forged in fire. We tell them they'll be ready for game day. But also I have a diverse staff in different personalities. We have crazies like me. We have thinkers. We have quiet people. We have, Uncle Matt, and we have guys that provide stability to them socially. So I'm really pleased with our staff. Now, if you had a whole staff like me, it probably wouldn't go well, but you also need a couple coaches with some juice. So, but I am aware of there's a fine line between forging and fire and getting to the point where the kid's getting demeaned. Yeah. And when the kid shuts down mentally, he's shutting down physically, and nobody's getting better. And, if you're truly coaching to make a difference in today's youth, you got to know where that line is. It's taken me a lot of years to get to that. And I think ego drives coaches to do things that they know probably aren't good for kids. But I think once you realize your purpose and why you're there, and, we always talk about, we want humble warriors. You got to be tough to play in Sumner. We work out year round because we play a certain style of football. And I'm going to expect you to be tough, physically and mentally, but we're also going to know that you are much more to us than just an athlete. You are a person, and we want to encompass all that.
I want to shift over to kind of the path to the championship, and really, again, drawing out what athletes can learn from each of those experiences. And so, number one, like week 1, you're like, all right, let's set it up. Defending 2-time state champs, week 1, let's go against them. Why did you choose that, and what can athletes learn from that?
Well, it was the first year that we've had non-league games since I've been the head coach.
Hmm.
So I was super excited. But then you got to decide, who are we going to play? Are you going to play a team you can beat by 50? Are you going to play a team that might be better than you? Eric Curley from GK, he's retired now, but he used to always tell me, play hard non-league games because they're just going to benefit you for the playoffs. And I used to think, I don't want too hard games because I want to win every game. But he told us, if you lose an early game to a really good team, it's going to help you down the road. So when Lake Stevens reached out, we agreed to play them. Okay. Defending state champs, one of the best offenses in the state of Washington, with the returning Gatorade Player of the Year. But I thought we were going to be ready. I thought we'd be really good defensively. The Westland out of Oregon, the number one team out of Oregon, I didn't really want that. I was trying to get a game with another team down there, and I asked Westland to help me out, and he said, well, we need a week 3 game. So I remember thinking, do I want to put my money where my mouth is and play the best competition we can play? And we lost that Westland game, but I left there feeling great about my team, that we had been put in situations that were going to help us down the road, because, your end goal is to go as far as you can in the playoffs and hopefully win the state championship. Now, that can't be everyone's goal, but that's Sumner's goal. And I think the adversity that we had in the Lake Stevens game carried us the whole season. I've told the Lake Stevens coaches this. They run so much crazy stuff. We had to prepare all summer and fall for them. And we feel like we'd seen everything offensively that we were going to see week 1. So we would, week 4, week 5, they're like, oh, this Lake Stevens did this, or Lake Stevens did this, or we saw this against Lake Stevens. So that adversity that it put us in, plus it went into overtime. I don't even remember, if we missed a field goal. There was a lot of situations this year that I think built us for the long haul.
Yeah.
You can't just beat everyone and think that it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And wasn't that the one, didn't kicker hit, wasn't that like 54-yarder or something insane like that too?
Yeah, I'm really bad at remembering games, Nick.
That's right.
My high school coach, Coach Ernaga, he can remember every play that's ever happened from 40 years ago. But I know that we made a long kick, and then I think we missed a kick that would have won it. And I remember not even one time even getting mad about that. I just turned around and said, let's go into overtime. And so that was a change of me.
Yeah.
I would have been mad for 30 seconds and that we didn't win it. But I was just looking at it. Hey, we kind of had this slogan. It is what it is. And it was really just for me, because that helped me not take everything so serious. So when we missed that kick, it is what it is. We went into overtime, and I don't think, we created any stress about going into overtime. It was just like, let's see what happens. And I think that's a reason our kids responded so well.
Well, yeah. And then it set the foundation for, wasn't it Chiawana in the playoffs that was like triple overtime or whatever?
And we didn't even get rattled, Nick. Same thing. We missed a kick to win it. We made it to tie it, missed it. Their guy missed it. And, our sidelines and coaching staff really stayed even keel through there. And that's something that hasn't happened at Sumner. I know that I've caused some undue stress amongst coaches and players, throughout my career. And I've really grown up, which is funny to say I'm 58, but I've finally really grown up, and I realized that some of that stress was unhealthy and not letting my players play to their peak performance. And if that's my goal, then I needed to change. So yeah, that Chiawana game was amazing. Never once did I even think we were going to lose or win. I just thought we were going to play till the next day. I mean, even at halftime, we were down 21-7. I didn't even say one thing about, playing bad or this. And we just rested. Halftime's very important to us, Nick. We don't do much coaching at halftime. You know what we do at halftime? We get hydrated and we get our sandwiches in us. And we think that's huge. We are a second half team, and people think we're a second half team because we make great, decisions in there, and we don't. We get our kids in there, we sit them down, we get them water, we get them their sandwich, we make sure they breathe and rest, and then we just give them a little pep talk. And, I think some coaches go in there and yell or coach and get everyone riled up. We're the opposite now. Get yourself rested. We got another half a game. So Chiawana, I don't even think we even mentioned that we were down 14 points and what we needed to do. We just went back out and took care of business. It was nice to see. That was a
Yeah.
battle. That was an epic game. That's probably the greatest game that I've been involved in my 28 years at Sumner.
Yeah. That was
The
probably
kids talk about it. They always talk about it. It was so physical.
yeah.
I mean, we're physical and they were just as physical.
Hmm.
Everyone was looking forward to that game, so they got it. They got it.
Yeah, there was some I mean, some of the crazy plays too. I don't. We could go on about it, but like there were some crazy highlight reels from that for sure. So when we talk about Lake Stevens, when we talk about also, I think even the Chiawana example, what can athletes draw from those decisions of playing those competitive teams and like you said, those halftime adjustments when you talk about like long-term goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our goal every year is to reach our maximum potential. We have a lot of goals, but I think if you really ask kids, what is your main goal? And that's to reach their maximum potential. And every kid has a different maximum potential. Mm-hmm. And our job as a coach is to get every kid to their maximum potential, wherever it is. And we feel if we can get everyone on our team to their maximum potential, we're going to be much better. And I demand that amongst my coaches. We coach every kid hard to try to get him to his maximum potential. So kids understand, when they might get frustrated that practice is hard or we went longer, we did this again and again. I think once they know that we're just here to try to get them to reach their maximum potential, and if each kid can reach his maximum potential, then the team's going to reach their maximum potential. And that's our main goal. And I think that every athlete, that should be their goal. And nowadays, it encompasses a lot of things, Nick. It encompasses, we talk about humble warriors, student athletes. You got to go to school. You got to be in class. You got to pass your classes. You got to train year round. You got to eat like an athlete. You got to take care of yourself like an athlete. To be an elite athlete, even in high school, it's a year-round thing now. You don't get to take 6 months off and just lay around and play video games, okay? We're asking a lot from our kids. And I think to be a competitive high school team in Washington, your kids got to prepare year-round for it.
Yeah. No, that's good. And then as we talk about too, we're just even talking about some of those key moments of the season. Like, I mean, I even remember, I think it was the Chiawana game, one of the insane throws that Nate threw and some of the catches from the receivers, and the field goals as we talked about, but there was also the fake punt in the state championship. So, I think there's a few pieces that athletes can learn from that. So, number one, why you made that call. Why do you practice them regularly? And then, what can athletes learn from that?
Well, there was numerous times during the season that we took chances, okay? Mm-hmm. But to us, it's not a chance because we practice it every single day. I'm in charge of punt and punt block. So we try to block every punt. That's all we practice. So we're trying to rush your deep snapper and your punter up. We have the lowest punt net yardage against us every year because that punter knows that if he's back there taking his time, it's going to get blocked. So we want to create that stress on those kids. We also practice fake punts every single day. We have a period in practice where we run them. And there'll be games that we don't call anything. And the kids are like, Coach, why do we practice this every day if we're never going to do it? Okay. Hence your examples. Okay. We ran 2 fake punts in the playoffs and we blocked a punt for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. So I think that in the Kamiakin game, we blocked a punt for a touchdown and then got a first down on a fake punt. That turned the game to end up being an easier victory. But, you ask about the Camas game, and why I called that punt at that, because I would have never called that any place in my career because I would have been afraid of what people would have thought of me. Because if we didn't get that fake punt, we probably lose the game. They got the ball on our 35. But I thought at the moment that if we punt it, they're going to milk the clock out and kick a field goal and beat us. And I didn't ask any of my coaches. I didn't ask any players. I just called it. And then I got nervous and tried to call it off. But the kids had already got the signal and didn't look back at me, which I'm glad they didn't. But I think that I was able to take that chance because football's just football. It's not life. My life wouldn't have been over if it didn't work. In the past, I don't think I could have made that call because I would have been terrified of what people would have thought of me as a coach. But once, as a coach, if you get over what people are going to think about you and just coach the way you want to coach, and that won us the game. That coach, I've talked to him, and he said, there's no way that they thought we were going to run that fake punt. Now, when we lined up for a punt the first time in the game, our guys said they were all yelling, watch the fake, watch the fake. But at that point, no one said it, because it was in our own territory. And, in hindsight, that's what won us the game because we made a few plays. Donnie made a couple great throws down the field. We got to milk the clock out, call timeout. That was one of the greatest moments of my life when we called time. Well, they called timeout and the kids came over and I said, we're going to win the state championship, and they turned right around and went out there and did it. And it was amazing. It was, it's everything that you dream about as a coach. That feeling that I got was I was just so prideful of our players and our town. And you saw our crowd, the biggest crowd in state history, 10,000 people. It was just so amazing for our program and for our kids because you can never take that away from the kids. I said, when you're 40, and you're down on your luck, just remember, man, you were a state champ. And it was a great moment for our program. And, you mentioned earlier, I had said with one of my videos with Shot in the Dark that I didn't think I needed to win a state championship anymore. When you get into coaching, you think you got to win a state championship to be, respected but I think when I realized I don't need to win one, that probably took some pressure off too. Yeah. And I just had more fun. I've had more fun coaching the last 3 or 4 years than I had my whole career because I took a lot of pressure off myself. And I think that's a direct reflection on how our kids play. So I've learned a lot about, and I love to mentor young coaches. I kind of feel that's my calling right now because this sport has changed my life from where I played in high school to the coaches I had and the town and, the impact that my coaches had on me. I know that I'm here to change lives. And while I'm changing lives, we might as well win some football games. Okay. And, I just think that it was just a combination of a great team, great leaders, tough kids that played hard, coaching staff that was dialed in. You got to just have everything, no injuries. It was a great ride. And now, we're on to how do we repeat or how do we get, how do we recapture what we had, knowing that it's a different team? Yeah. That's something that I need to look into because I have never experienced that.
Yeah. Well, and I know we talked about that a bit before, and I think that's an important thing. There's three things I want to draw from that. So number one, like when we speak to the athlete from those lessons, you talk about taking those risks, but you also talk about preparing for those risks. And then the having fun piece, like what can athletes draw from that in terms of them trying to reach their full potential?
Well, yeah, you better enjoy it because it's hard. I tell parents, this is a sick, violent game. And, your kids got to love it. But it's not the 70s anymore where we just go out there and smash each other's faces all day long and the coach yells at us and we still love it. I mean, these kids got lots of issues going on in their lives, family lives, school's hard, life sucks for a lot of them. And I think that, I call myself the shepherd of the valley because one day I was like, I had kids off campus and I had kids flunking and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm like a shepherd, as the head coach. Once in a while, you're going to get kids that are going to wander off and try to, do some different things. And you just got to go out and grab them and bring them back in and put your arms around them and tell them you love them, tell them what they need to do to change and get better, and then give them that opportunity. I give kids more chances now, Nick, than I've ever given. I used to be like, you're done, bye. And now I just keep loving on kids and try to, I have a kid on this team that, I could have given up on 20 times. And sometimes I still wonder why I didn't, but now I know why I didn't, because he got it turned around, had a successful late career. He's going to go to college. And, I think 10 years ago, I think I would have kicked him off the team, but kids are different. Coaches are different. Everyone's different. It's hard to be a student athlete, especially at a big program. And so, I try to get all our coaches to understand that. They get mad at kids sometimes for decisions they make. And I'm like, we made that decision. We've all done that before. So, I take it I take it very seriously that all 158 kids are mine. And we try to love and respect every kid the same. Now, kids aren't going to play if they're not good enough. That's just, they know that. But kids are going to be respected if they come to practice, if they come to, weight room, if they show up when they're supposed to. We're going to respect them as much as we do the superstars, maybe even more. Some of my favorite kids are the kids that never start but work harder than anybody, because I know those are the kids that are going to be our bosses someday. I always tell those kids, you're going to be the boss someday of all these kids, But we're trying to build habits for life. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're a coach and that's not your goal, then you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah. So the third piece of it that I want to draw out is you talk about the, kind of that coming down after the state championship, and it's that what's next type of thing. And, you see somebody like Tom Brady, for example, who went back and won multiple. And I feel like a lot of that came down to he didn't stay up here for too long. He, got to that work piece. What do you feel like as you're kind of in that period figuring things out? What do you feel like you're learning that the athletes really need to take on when they, say they get a college offer, they get their, D1 commitment, whatever it might be, what can they learn from those high moments?
Yeah, it was great right after. I mean, we were on mountaintops, getting coaches of the years and players of the years and going to all these award ceremonies and the Seahawks coach of the year. And it was quite a ride for me, and it was fun. And it was, it was something that I know was earned through a lot of hard work. And like you said, we have kids now that have offers. They're sophomores. We have kids that have already won the state championship. Fear of mine is that my coaches and our players won't be able to get back to where we need to be. That's why before the Chiefs, nobody had ever repeated Super Bowl. Because once you've been there, they say, do you really get back down to where you need to be? And so that's a fear of mine. And I mentioned that before we got started, that, when does that time take place, Nick? Now, we're working hard on the off season, but I don't know if our kids understand that last year's team won the state championship. And this year's team hasn't won anything. And I'm fearful that there's going to have to be a coming to Jesus day where, I got to let them know that you have to make your own legacy. And we still haven't got to that point, Nick. We're still riding a high. Our rings are just coming in this week, and, we got our state champ shirts, but we've built this program on hard work. And so we'll get the kids there. They'll understand that, yes, we accomplished that, but we haven't accomplished anything for the 2025 season. We're a group of hard workers. It'll take some coddling, probably, to get people to understand that it's just not going to happen again, which is probably a coach's number one job, is to make sure that his kids are doing what they need to do it to be prepared.
Well, and that's what's important too with the athletes is, like you said, recognizing when is it time to okay, you can celebrate those wins, celebrate whether it be the state championship or the offers or whatever, but there's a moment where you have to, make that shift to what's the next thing.
Yeah. So there's like I said, we get our rings on Thursday. So I'm hoping after we celebrate on Thursday and Friday and wear our rings, that on that Monday, I can tell the kids that are coming back that last year's officially over. Okay. And so now we have to get that, that crazy drive that we had to get to the state championship. We have to get that back. And you will not win another one if you think that you're just going to show up and win one. So we will start back to square one. At practice on June, we'll be right back to just getting in our stance and starts for 3 days. We'll go back to the basics and make sure our kids are prepared again and are working hard enough in the summer and still have that desire to make their team a legacy team.
Yeah.
And like I said, I might reach out to some coaches that have repeated and see what their mentality was. Was it, hey, let's repeat again? Or is it, hey, we got to, start from scratch. So I don't know what to do. We have a lot of returners. I'm really excited about this next year's team. I just got to make sure that we still understand why we won it and what it took to win it.
Yeah. Well, and it's also I think of it as like you're public enemy number one now in the 4A. And so,
Absolutely.
and I think about it as like, Drew Wicklander. So, he got his Z1 offer. He put in all the work to get to where he was at. Now this year he's public enemy number one, and it's very difficult because everyone's throwing him curveballs, throwing him all these things, and that's going to be same for you guys. Of like, yeah, people are going to target you now.
Well, I saw Drew Wicklander today in the hallway, and man, he looks amazing. I remember when I introduced you guys when he was just a teeny little skinny baseball player. He looks amazing.
Yeah.
So he looks like a college baseball player now. So kids forget that. You got to have your body ready for college, not just your abilities. Well, that's a good question because Sumner is always on everyone's schedule that's the team they got to beat. We've had a lot of success lately. We play a brand of football that some people don't like. We play a physical brand. We're going to play for 48 minutes. So, yes, we're always there anyways. And now we're state champs and we're Sumner and we got people think we have all this money and we have all the support and all this stadium and, our community. And so, yeah, people are going to be coming after us and preparing for us just like we did. We studied Lake Stevens all off season. For that one game. Yeah. And we barely beat them. But I think that, catapulted us to a state championship. But yeah, teams are going to be, we're not going to just be able to show up and think we're going to have success. So teams are going to give us their best game. We as a staff and players need to know that we better be ready to go and, be humble and make this year's team special. Not last year's team. But yeah, you're right. Everyone's coming for us. I've already talked to Lake Stevens and, they didn't like losing that first game after winning the state championship, just like we won't like, I've talked to Westland coaches, about the game. And so we know we're getting everyone's best and we have, but we're prepared. We have a great league, Puyallup and GK and, we're battling championship teams week in and week out, which prepare us for, we have Yelm, GK, and us all have won a state championship, in the last 4 years? Mm-hmm. We're all in the same league. So, we know every week's important, but now teams, who doesn't want to be the state championship team? So you're right. We'll have a little target on our back, but we like that.
Yeah. When it keeps keeps that discomfort, keeps a little bit so you don't get too comfortable. Yeah, I think it's like you said, like that forged by fire of like challenging yourself to not just go for that. No, don't just go and play on the easy team or don't just go and, actually like earn where you really want to go.
Yeah. I've worked harder, Nick, this off season than I've ever worked because I'm afraid of, getting too complacent. So I've studied more this off season and went to more clinics and read more books because I was fearful that I've been chasing this my whole life, Nick, and it finally happened. And I don't want to get like, oh, we won it, so let me just fizzle out the last couple of years. I'm too competitive for that. So I've really worked hard and we'll make sure the kids understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. So last question I want to ask is more open-ended. This gives you, again, more of an opportunity, again, to speak to the athlete. I know you have your Black Flag meetings. You have all these different opportunities, experiences that the athletes who, again, want to maximize their potential, they want to play in college, D1, pro, etc. Like, what would be your biggest piece of advice or biggest thing that they need to understand as an athlete?
The thing that I've learned from being in this situation is your habits better match your goals. And that is the biggest thing that keeps kids from going to college. And if you want to be a college athlete, your habits have to match that. You can't get C's. You can't not get out of bed. You can't not work out. You can't not train all season. You can't not play on this team or that team. When we'll call kids out, they'll, I'm going to college. Well, you have a 2.1 GPA. So, your habits in the classroom are not helping you get there. Or I'm going to college, but you're not fast enough or strong enough or heavy enough and you're not doing anything about it. And we don't call them out to make them feel bad. We call it a reality check. And we do it out of respect and love, but we don't tell our kids that they're going to college when we don't think they are. Now, we tell every kid that if you work really hard at all phases, you might have the chance to go play in college. Most athletes, Nick, I think that's their goal when they're young, to play in the professionals and go to college on a D1 scholarship. But reality says there's about 2% that are going to do that. And what makes you that 2%? 1.5 of it is pure genetics. The biggest, strongest, fastest guys get the scholarships. So if you're not that, what are you going to do to make sure you get that? Peyton Wing is a perfect example. He was a former player of ours, a little undersized and a little slow, they said, for D1. He got one offer, Nick, one offer. And he went down there and dominated for 3 years, was third in the Big Sky in tackles, and now he just committed to Montana. He's going to play middle backer for one of the best FCS teams in the country. And, he outworked everyone. He's tougher than everyone. He trains harder. He takes it serious. He's got a, 3-point GPA. We tell our kids, you need to be a professional athlete. And professional athlete doesn't mean you get paid. It means you're perfecting your craft and you're the best at your craft. So we tell our kids, one, even to play on Sumner High School team, you need to be a professional. But if you want to go to college, you can go to college. There is 600 colleges that play football in the country. And most kids only know like 5, UW, UCLA, USC. Okay. And only 1% are going to those schools. So the kids that are going to go, if they want to go on, their habits in the classroom have to be pretty intense. So I feel kids, look in the mirror and see if you're really, what you're doing, is it really the 2%? Are you doing everything that everyone else does? Or are you doing more? Just little things like that. And we can find you a college. There's colleges out there where you can go. But I just think, that dream when you're in your mom and dad have that dream for you. Oh, they're going to play at the UW and they're 5'10" linemen, so they're not playing at the UW, but where can we get you to go? And what do we need to do to get you there? So we're huge on going to college and trying to play football if that's what you want. 2 of our best players this year, our defensive player of the year, one's going into the military and one's going into the fire academy. They don't want to play college football, but they sure trained like they wanted to be college football players. And their life, nothing they did in the last 3 years is going to have a negative effect on their life. It's going to make their life better. They learned habits that are going to make them successful in life. And I think if you're a true student athlete, those habits are going to guide you into the next phase of your life, which is being a husband and a father and a boss and a worker and a society member. We're trying to train kids to create habits that's going to make their life better. I think football is the ultimate team game where you need everyone on your team to be at their peak, to be a great team. And I think that, there's a lot of internal pressure about, whoa, that's how, people always ask me or call me, Nick, how we get so many people in the weight room. And I said, we don't do it. The kids do it. There's an internal pressure. Like if you're going to play football at Sumner High, you're in the weight room year round because that's the brand of football we play. Also, though, and this for a fact, that we love our multi-sport athletes. Yeah. We are not a team that says, hey, you need to do this year round. I think that's really detrimental to kids. And I think that coaches that put that pressure on kids aren't doing kids any favor. I mean, I love our kids on track and baseball and lacrosse and wrestling and basketball, 7-on-7. Our goal is when you're not in that, then you're in the weight room, because whatever you do in the weight room is going to make you a better athlete in any sport you choose. But, I think let kids be kids. And when it's my time with them, we're going to take it serious and work as hard as we can. But I think it's important for kids to strive to be their best. We have lots of slogans: own the day, win the day, and I think they're very important. I think our kids should wake up every day and be thankful that they're up and go attack their day. And, you mentioned the black flag, and, the black flag has nothing to do with Spartans. It has everything to do with not surrendering. So we decide what we got to do year round to not surrender on Friday nights. And football is not a real war. You go home and, go to bed and, have dinner. But while we're there, we want that mentality that we are not going to surrender because we've put in that time. We put in more time than you did. We meet on Sunday nights and we lift on Sunday nights only because we know nobody else is lifting on Sunday nights. So our kids know that they got one extra day. So that's our no surrender with the black flag. And I think it's a great motto for life. You should get up every day knowing you're not going to surrender to life's, and especially today with kids, life's tough. And I want to prepare them to have the life of their dreams. And I want to prepare them for when life punches you in the mouth, that you're going to be able to get up and attack it. We talk about those games you talked about. Chihuahua, Lake Stevens, Camas, we talk about that's life punching you in the face and how are you going to respond? And so, I think football prepares kids for life better than any sport, because where else are you getting just knocked in the face? Every day. It's a good simulation of life, because life's hard, and our kids are going to be prepared for it. Hopefully that's my goal. I hope the kids leave here knowing that we cared about them no matter how good they were. And I hope they leave knowing that they always have a place back here at Sumner High. You've seen our sidelines with our alumni kids. I love it. That Chihuahua game that's my favorite game ever, because it was the greatest game ever. And we had 40 alumni down in the end zone that when the game was won in overtime, the alumni was out on the field dancing with the players. And that just really says something about our program, that the past players that almost got there, they weren't jealous. They were excited that these players finally got there, and that meant a lot to me as a coach.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, so many good lessons. And this is why I wanted to have you on. So I'm glad this is your first podcast, because you got to do more. Because there's seriously just there are so many things from the risk taking to, like you really emphasize right there, the habits. I think a lot of what we talk about comes down to the habits of, you practicing the fourth downs, the punts, the everything. Right. And so, and then there's just so much, and I cannot summarize it in one statement by any means, because there's just so many things. And so I just want to say thank you for hopping on and to, really share all of that wisdom that you've learned over the years.
Yeah. And I thank you. And, it was my pleasure, but, thank you to you too, for, having, enough wisdom to get a hold of me and talk to me about, nutrition's important. We always think it is, but did we really do enough? And you've taught us that, we lift hard, we gotta feed our muscles, and we gotta sleep. And I think those kids are missing those things. And that's what we talk about, habits. If you want to get bigger and stronger, you got to lift, you got to sleep, and you got to eat, and you got to eat the right food. Okay. So, you've done a lot for us, getting our kids understanding about nutrition. So thank you for that. Because I think to be an elite team, you got to incorporate all of that into your athletes. So, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And again, listeners, go back and listen to whether it be certain snippets that you're like, hey, I got to linger on that a little bit more. I got to wrestle with that. Make some notes, because athletes always find a way to improve those habits, because that's what's going to lead to the championships, really.
That's going to determine your future. Are your habits in line with what goals you have? And for any kid that says they want to do this or that, they need to look at their habits, because if your habits aren't aligned with it, it's not going to happen. That's what I would say to kids. Create great habits early, and, be different, own the day, win the day, start something at your school and change the plight of your school. That's what we did here. We had won the championship in 50 years, and these kids changed the plight of Sumner High.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
No, it was a good year. But yeah, thanks again, Coach. And then for listeners, as always, keep striving for greatness.